Chapter 1 Highway to Nowhere. Bruce and Jennifer Smith were a nice enough couple. Everyone in their church thought so. More than that, they seemed to be the epitome of spiritual rectitude. Jennifer headed a weekly Bible study group, and Bruce met with a men's prayer breakfast every other week. They even believed fervently in deliverance, which isn't always that accepted in many circles. Nevertheless, they often prayed with other couples to be freed from spiritual bondage. They were the go-to people in their church when it came to matters of spiritual warfare. It all looked so good, and in many ways it was. Bruce and Jennifer did help a lot of people, and lives were changed by their intervention. They gave good advice and blessed many couples with encouragement and prayer. How could anything that seemed to be so good go so bad? Christian couple in for a surprise. It didn't happen overnight. They were busy for the Lord. Nothing wrong with that, at least on the surface. They were there every time the church doors were open. Who could fault such a sacrificial dedication? Neither of them was ever too busy to stop whatever they were doing to counsel someone in need. God certainly must have been pleased with their lives, except that He wasn't. At least not when it came to certain matters of spiritual inconsistency. And it wasn't until they ended up in my office for a personal one-on-one encounter that the truth unraveled. Ironically, they didn't come for themselves. They came for their 16-year-old son, James. He was exhibiting rebellion, and they looked to me for advice to get past their little bump-in-the-road parenting crisis. Straighten out James was their mandate. They weren't overbearing. After all, these were loving, godly parents. They just felt that my help with some mid-course adjustments to the relationship with their son would get them back to normal. What these parents didn't realize was that the entire family was on a highway to nowhere with the bridge out, oblivious to the warning signs they should have seen. Consequently, I asked James to wait in another room while I talked first with his parents. "So let's talk about your relationship as husband and wife first," I said. Their body language showed that they were a little miffed by my focusing on them. I could tell they wanted to get on with the job of correcting James's behavior. When I minister to families in crisis, I often approach the family dynamic with a simple premise in mind. Good parents produce good kids, and bad parents produce troubled children. I understand that this is not an inviolable rule. There are exceptions where truly good parents have a kid who gets misdirected, as with the prodigal son. Stuff happens. After all, Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." My emphasis on old presupposes that certain children will stray, but return to the fold at some later point. But quoting that verse would be a small comfort to the Smiths now. They were desperate for their son to be fixed. But just a few minutes into my dialogue with Mom and Dad revealed that the whole family system was sick, just as I had suspected. I first compiled some family history. Bruce and Jennifer had met at a Christian college. Both were on a career path for full-time ministry. The plan got interrupted by marriage and pregnancy. A little probing revealed that James's conception preceded marriage, something few people knew, certainly not their church family. That bit of discomfort was a warm-up for my next line of questions. How much personal Bruce-Jennifer time do you two have together? Not much. Where did the family last get away for vacation with just the three of them? About 4 years ago. Things have been too busy. Do you know who James's closest friends are? And do they ever come over to the house? We're not sure. We could ask him. He's mentioned a couple of names. When do you pray together as a family? Every meal, special occasions. Have you ever broken family curses? We have your book, Curse Breaking, and plan to do it sometime, but we both put in long hours and haven't gotten to it yet. How often do you engage in personal intimacy and have sex? What has that got to do with anything? Okay, they didn't say that, but they were certainly thinking it. They emotionally stiffened with nonverbal resistance to that line of questioning. The tension in the room was thick as a San Francisco fog. It was palpable. Both squirmed. They were so nonplussed that the long silence didn't end until I said, "Just approximate it. I don't need a log of your intimacy, just a general idea." They glanced at each other nervously. I don't know, a while," Bruce responded. "What's a while?" Jennifer jumped in. "We haven't slept together in 5 years, if that's what you want to know." "Separate bedrooms?" "Not exactly. We have a pull-out couch in our bedroom, and—" Jennifer forced back a tear. "I sleep there," Bruce interjected, a tinge of anger and hurt in his voice. "And you think that James isn't aware of that? And it has no influence on his behavior?" "I guess we just thought that was private and none of his business," Bruce shot back. Such was the beginning of what became an intense time of marriage intervention. But before going on with that, let me jump to the reason we're starting this book with the example of a publicly vibrant Christian couple who secretly were headed nowhere in their relationship. Christian families in crisis. The crisis condition of the North American Christian family is a point that Laura and I want to make early on in this book. Far too many homes of evangelical faith are damaged and dysfunctional. After decades of counseling hundreds of couples, I have concluded that the majority, you read right, the majority of Christian families are relationally, sexually, emotionally, and spiritually out of sync with the message of Christ's gospel. These families are in serious spiritual bondage and need to be set free. Sadly, most Christian couples don't know their marriages and families are messed up, and that only drastic spiritual intervention will avoid disaster. They are almost willingly ignorant of the many ways that Satan has robbed their joys and destinies. Tragically, some don't want to know how bad things are. It's too painful to be honest about the inconsistencies between Christian values and what goes on behind closed doors. In response to this crisis, Laura and I offer many years of experience in parenting, counseling, and ministry, including deliverance ministry. We want to emphasize at the start of this book that there is a biblical way out of the Bruce and Jennifer dilemma. But we must first acknowledge that all too many Christian families are filled with good intentions and a lot of self-deception. Laura's take on purposeful parenting. What Jennifer and Bruce may have missed in all of their attempts to faithfully serve the Lord is that God really does have a plan for parents and their children. That plan, a paradigm for all followers of Christ, is expressed in Jeremiah 29:11, NIV. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." But memorizing or quoting that scripture isn't enough. Having it cross-stitched on a sampler somewhere won't mend a broken marriage. It's easy to believe Jeremiah's words when things are going well. Maybe not so when a family crisis arises. Let's begin with a simple premise that is foundational when Bob and I minister to a troubled family. Every one of us was created for a reason, a purpose. The trap Satan sets is getting us to think that we should be doing more and more. And enough is never enough. This deception gets magnified when we look at our children. We know that God has a plan for them. But what if it isn't unfolding as we had imagined? Face it, there are times when children are defiant, even rebellious. They seem to set themselves up for a questionable, even a failure-filled future. As parents, that makes us feel helpless. We ask ourselves how this could happen. They were loved and brought up with Christ's teachings from an early age. We lament over and over, where did we go wrong? Like Bruce and Jennifer in Bob's account above, too many parents are busy doing stuff, even for the Lord, and not communicating clearly to their children how to seek the will of God. It's tough to do in the face of media portrayals of parents as clueless and out of touch. Parents have to show their children how to seek God's plan for their lives. It's obvious that the Smiths didn't do that. Grace over lunch and busyness for Jesus doesn't cut it in our age of so many immoral options. Purposeful parenting gives the kind of guidance that lets children know they are in a spiritual battle. At times, it will seem as if everything around them opposes God's will. They must know that to yield to ungodly plans for their lives is a terrible option. In fact, it is downright dangerous and can steal their eternal destiny. Purposeful parents inform their children early on that the charade of evil has been meticulously designed by the architect of evil himself. If you feel challenged by your lack of parenting skills, don't hyperventilate and don't get caught in the guilt of your past errors that drive you to insist on perfection from your children. Keep this book in hand, relax in the Lord, and let Bob and I walk you through the life lessons we've learned from personal experience and from assisting other parents with families that are out of sync. Read carefully what Bob writes next. You may find yourself on the pages that follow. Righting the Smiths' Sinking Ship. By the time that Jennifer and Bruce calmed down from their shock, I suggested a bit of musical chairs. I sent Mom and Dad into another room and focused on James to get his side of the story. Not to my surprise, James' view of family life in the Smith household was far more cynical than his parents might have suspected, and his personal life was way more off course than the worst fears his parents could have imagined. "Let's get real," I said to start the dialogue with James. "Your parents say you're rebellious. What does that mean? Be blunt. If you don't tell the truth, I can't help you." James hung his head to ward off a little self-consciousness and a whole lot of shame. He began talking about things his parents didn't know about him. His behavior as self-described had enough sin and moral inconsistencies to match someone twice his age. Drugs, sexual activity, a girlfriend on her second abortion, friends who dabbled in the occult had all been obscured from Mom and Dad by carefully crafted lies. James was part of the family conspiracy of hypocrisy that had been implicitly designed to keep the truth hidden so that the perfect Christian family image was intact. Outward respectability and inward inconsistencies. James played the game almost as well as his parents with their couch in the bedroom approach to intimate connection. James had been lying to his parents because their lives were a lie to him. And Satan and his demons were all too pleased to nudge along this fanciful concept of the Christian family life. Then James dropped a bombshell. He had taken someone's car for a joyride, and the police had caught him just a few miles into the drive. A compassionate cop helped him return the car safely and agreed not to file a report so long as James stayed out of trouble. The incident had scared him to his core. It was enough of a close call to get his attention about the state of spiritual decline in his life. That part of his wake-up call was positive, but what James couldn't understand was how his family life had set him up for this brief criminal escapade. I explained to James a core belief that I've adopted after decades of helping to free families. No act of defiance or rebellion exists in a vacuum of unintended consequences. All spiritual declension is a result of a family bloodline chain reaction. I further explained that the spiritual inconsistencies of his parents were compromising his ability to stay on the path toward godly success. For now, let's step back for a moment from the Bruce, Jennifer, James saga and consider some of the impediments that keep families from being free. I'll lay these out in a series of false assumptions that pervade the thinking of many families in crisis. False assumptions of couples in crisis. We'll fix it ourselves. This is perhaps the most common false conclusion that I encounter when trying to help parents and children toward a more spiritually healthy way of living. This assumption enforces secrecy about even the most corrupt of conditions. It's based on the idea that devout spiritual faith gives all the information and practical tools to get out of difficult situations. Not true. A strong confidence in God and His Word is a great help to navigate the challenges that life presents. But family and parenting has its own unique, combustible mixture of destabilizing factors that can't always be reduced to a Bible verse. A glaring fault of the "we'll fix it" syndrome is the failure to recognize that few families possess the internal objectivity to see what's wrong and take appropriate action. It's the old "can't see the forest for the trees" maxim at work. Marriage and parenting may be the most intensely emotionally draining task to which we human beings are called. When all isn't going well, it's hard to keep focused and balanced. To ask a couple to be absolutely honest about their marriage difficulties or to be transparent concerning the actions of their children may require an honesty that is nearly impossible to achieve. By law and ethics, therapists can't treat their own families. Doctors can't diagnose and prescribe medications for spouses and children. There are good reasons for these guidelines. When an individual is too close to you, as in a family bond, impartiality with regard to good judgment may be lacking. For the family in crisis, outside intervention is almost always necessary. You'll hear us repeat this theme over and over in this book. If the reader has a stressed marriage, if all isn't well with the parent-child relationship, get help outside the immediate family. When possible, get professional help, pastoral help, the input of trusted, mature friends. Read good how-to books on the various challenges of marriage and parenting. There are a lot of great books out there. Check out the book stand of your local Christian bookstore and you may be amazed at the quantity of information already available. Don't reinvent the wheel. Chances are that some good Christian writer already has it rolling. Biblically instilled values will always produce the desired results in the family. Wrong again. Of course, it's good to inculcate the Word of God into the belief system of the family, but doing so is not an automatic guarantee that each member will live consistent with that teaching. Each family member has his or her own will, and they may not make individual choices that are consistent with Christian faith. The family that prays together stays together, goes the old adage. It's mostly true, but not always. The intense pressures of the world around us cause spiritual erosion over time. Christian kids can be caught sexting. Not every movie your children see will be okay, no matter how diligently you check the ratings and read the reviews. Music with anti-Christian lyrics, television shows with off-color themes, and profane comments from supposedly Christian peers may all take a toll on your children. Teaching them what God says will help deter them from making bad choices, but don't assume that consistent godliness will be the automatic result of having a Christ-centered home. Raising your children with godly principles will give them an advantage in life, but it won't ensure that all their choices will be healthy ones. Providing a good Christian education will keep children on the right path. Not necessarily so. Laura and I are certainly in favor of having children attend a Christian school or having them homeschooled so long as finances and circumstances allow. We have homeschooled all three of our daughters. I say we, but I'll be the first to admit that Laura has borne the main responsibility of their education because of my work and travel schedule. Laura has done an amazing job, but it has been extraordinarily stressful and demanding. However, there hasn't been a moment when we've regretted making the decision to homeschool our children. Scholastically and spiritually, they are way ahead of most of their secular public-schooled contemporaries. The sacrifices our family has made to pursue this educational direction has been worth it. But we realize that this option isn't always possible for all families, especially single parents. Even though we extol the value of Christian schools and homeschooling, we have observed many families that took that direction and ended up with far less than desired results. As you might imagine, there are many reasons that this choice of education didn't work out as hoped. We'll not dissect, at this point, all the factors of failure. Just be aware that there are no guarantees that a Christian education will be the best. However, Laura and I are convinced that, given the moral and scholastic conditions of most public schools, your parental chances for success with your children are a lot better if school courses are taught in the framework of Christian values. If we keep our children in church, things will turn out okay. Regular church attendance will help. It's the biblical thing to do. It provides regular communication of God's Word. There are better opportunities for friendships with Christian friends. If there's a good youth group, Your children will be more occupied with activities that are morally healthy. The length of benefits from a healthy church relationship are almost endless. But a strong church relationship isn't a fix-all for what may be wrong at home. Over and over, Christian kids in trouble tell me that the advantages they got from exposure to Christian faith in church didn't outweigh the damage of home where Christ was not Lord in any practical sense. Hypocrisy in the home is a huge reason why many youth don't follow the faith of their fathers. They don't want what mom and dad had because it didn't work in real life, at least not as they observed it with their parents. In homes where church attendance was mandatory every week, kids who have gone wrong have told me, "Sure, my parents took us to church, but at home we never talked. I never felt close to them. They never said they loved me. Mom and Dad behaved perfectly at church, but at home they fought all the time. It was miserable being around them because they were always ready to blow up at each other. At church there was all this hugging and handshaking, but at home my parents never showed any affection to each other except occasionally. I don't even know if they were in love with each other." Mom and Dad were hypocrites. They acted at home a lot different from the way they did in church. If that's Christianity, I don't want it. I don't even know what I believe. I hear what the preacher says, but it doesn't seem to work for our family. I just wish my parents would act like what they hear on Sunday. The theme is common: hypocrisy, inconsistency, disingenuousness, phoniness. Children quickly see through the claims of freedom in Jesus on Sunday and bondage to bad habits and variant behavior 6 days a week at home. We need to stay together for the sake of the children. No, you don't. I'm not suggesting you immediately call a divorce lawyer. I am aware that many pastors think a bad marriage with a two-parent home is better for a child than a broken home. I'm not so sure. I've seen many instances demonstrating the consequences of both sides of this kind of situation. My own counseling experience indicates that when parents stay together in an acrimonious relationship, the effect this has on the children is often more damaging than a divorce. Deciding which is best may mean choosing the proverbial lesser of two evils. Divorce can be devastating to a child, but a conflict-ridden marriage may be more damaging. Today in America, about 25% of children will end up in a step-family. At least 1 million children a year suffer through a divorce. Witnessing the loss of love in a home and then being shuttled back and forth between divorced parents can be a defining trauma in the life of a child. Their sense of trust is shaken, especially when the youngster sees the parents fighting over custody and behaving in very undependable ways. This may result in the child fancifully longing for a parental reunion. Without some solid Christian influence in such a situation, the separation anxiety can result in a permanent condition of instability. But when parents only cohabit for the benefit of the children, there can be equally devastating consequences. Such children often become depressed, even suicidal. During adolescence, the child of a bad marriage may be prone to drug or alcohol abuse and self-injurious behavior. Once grown, they may be hindered when trying to process stress and anger. Their resiliency to handle life's challenges will be severely restricted. Of course, a confident spiritual faith can override all these negatives, but a gloomy outcome in life is going to be hard to avoid. I want to underscore that both divorce and a phony marriage in the best interests of the child are equally bad, and neither should have to happen if both parents will determine to set the family free with the right kind of help. We're Christians. We don't believe in divorce, so somehow it will all work out. How many times have I heard that? Countless. How many times have I seen that go south? Countless. These are the same couples who don't seek counseling, or at least one of the partners refuses to. Why? Here is their logic. They're going to pray their way through it. They're trusting Jesus to heal their marriage. God can move mountains, why not mend their marriage? Besides, if they go to counseling, someone will find out that the family isn't as perfect as it appears. That will be embarrassing and raise a lot of questions they'd prefer not to answer. Let me bluntly tell you that this is a surefire setup for an affair, if not physical, at least emotional. Very few couples can continue in a loveless marriage, especially when it is sexless. Yes, for the sake of the children, some survive for a while, but things usually fall apart when the kids are gone. The couple that refuses to get help for a struggling marriage is allowing Satan to position them for an even worse outcome, a moral fiasco. The marriage partner whose emotional and physical needs aren't being met at home is giving the devil an open door to send along some who will commensurate with their dilemma. In fact, if your marriage is on the rocks or nearing the shoals of failure, Satan may already have someone picked out to seductively cross your path. And because failing to forthrightly address the marriage crisis is a transgression against the marriage, a demonic door is open. I've seen this scenario too many times. But I'd never do that, some say. To counter, we could cite the names of many well-known and successful evangelical pastors who have morally fallen in recent years. They were spiritually gifted. They built large and successful mega-churches. They wrote best-selling books and were on TV telling others how to live. Some even came from a lineage of godly predecessors in their family. The list of such men is a long, tragic commentary on the state of marriage in America. I have counseled some of these men and their wives. Some even resorted to pornography to jumpstart the marriage bed. Others turned to alcohol and illegal drugs. One well-known pastor of a huge international church admitted to having sex with 40 or 50 women in his church. The number wasn't precise because he couldn't remember all of them. The ones that I have ministered to tell me that they never saw themselves ending up spiritually shipwrecked. In the words of one famous pastor who eventually divorced, "I didn't know there was anything wrong with my marriage." Really? Was he that clueless? Likely. How can that be? Couples in crisis sometimes normalize their marital contradictions. They lie to themselves. They think that by hanging in there, God will somehow perform a miracle and rescue them. They have several things in common. They can never think of themselves as divorcing. They assume that their faith will keep them from sexual sin. They convince themselves that a bad marriage is their cross to bear for Jesus. The list of personal prevarications embraced by Christian leaders with bad marriages is lengthy, but all the self-deception leads to tragic places. A dingy hotel room and paid sex with a prostitute, self-medication with addictive substances, unquenchable anger at their mate and sometimes at God, to name a few bad possibilities. Don't think it can't happen to you, because it can. Were it not for sworn confidentiality, I could tell you of names you know, of men and women of God who lived the kind of lies that I just cited. Many of them lost their ministries, their reputation, their self-respect, even their families. For heaven's sake, if you're reading this book providentially and you see yourself on these pages, pick up your phone and call someone you can trust. Or make contact with a counseling professional who is specialized in marriage prevention. Contact our offices and set up a personal meeting with me to talk about your issues. We can help. Others can help. But you probably can't help yourself. Seeking help can be the sign of a good marriage. Laura and I will let you in on a secret. We've been to counseling for our marriage. First, before we got married, we sought advice from a mature Christian advisor. We'll allude to this individual later in the book. This Christian leader had written books on marriage. We read his books and met with him for pre-marriage evaluation. Second, soon after we were married, we sought further counseling to work out the wrinkles that any newly married couple will have. We didn't seek help because we were in crisis. We didn't have a bad marriage. We reached out because we wanted a better marriage. We needed objective input to work through some challenges we encountered during the adjustment to married life and starting our family. Please don't miss this important point. I'm repeating it for emphasis. We didn't seek help for a dysfunctional marriage. we sought professional advice to make our marriage stronger. Many churches see the need for pre-marriage counseling, although such arrangements are often only a cursory sign-off for the wedding ceremony. But there are some excellent programs to get couples started right. If you are thinking of getting married, be certain that the church in which your nuptials will take place has such requirements. This is an indication that the church and the pastor take your wedding vows seriously. Here's my concern. I don't know of churches that also require a marriage checkup after the couple is wedded. In some ways, that's when intervention is most needed. After the honeymoon period, when the couple is thinking of getting pregnant, or when the first serious conflicts arise, that is when further evaluation is needed. Setting the family free shouldn't start when there's a calamity like Bruce and Jennifer's, 15 to 20 years into the marriage. Laura and I spend a lot of time trying to patch together the broken lives of couples who are on the verge of separation or divorce. We also help couples who reach out for help at the first sign of serious conflict. The latter is much easier to fix than the former. To be certain that no reader is missing the point, let me lay it out clearly. 1. Competent pre-marriage counseling is a must to get the marriage started well. 2. Post-marriage counseling, preferably within the first year following the wedding, is a good way to check up on the health of the developing marriage bond. 3. Marriage accountability to a pastor or wise spiritual advisors is important throughout the married life to consistently reflect on areas needing improvement. 4. At the first sign of serious marital difficulties, adept outside help should be sought through books, seminars, enrichment programs, and whatever resources are readily available. 5. Adding children to the marriage equation is an important time for marriage reevaluation. The stresses on a marriage can be much more than most couples realize. A happy ending for Bruce, Jennifer, and James. I wish I could say that with the help of Christ, our ministry has been able to save every bad marriage that has come our way. That's not so. But we were able to get the Smith family back on track. It took some serious prodding to make Bruce realize his failures as a father and husband. A lot of healing prayer was needed to allow Jennifer to forgive and attempt a new start for the relationship. And it was very difficult to turn around James's cynicism and sense of despair about his future. But I'm happy to report today that the Smiths are well back on the road to recovery. They are becoming a testimony to grace, not another statistic of failure. It required many hours of therapeutic interaction between all three family members, with me interceding as an arbiter to enforce family honesty. It took repentance, reconciliation, and a lot of healing and deliverance prayers to move things closer to a biblical family model. One session didn't do it. We had to meet and pray several times. Each person had spiritual and relational homework to do. But over time, a true Christian marriage evolved, and James was able to stabilize his connection to both parents. Divorce was avoided, and James came to realize that his parents truly loved each other. He saw that love restored. Bruce and Jennifer now spend a lot more time together, and they have reunited on the intimate level. All is good for now, but I have been careful to warn this family that Satan waits at the door of their home, looking for permission to get back inside. Their family has set free, but now they need to learn how to live free and stay free.